Thank you for staying with us here on The Pulse. We start with the Attorney General, Dr. Dominic Ayine, who has uncovered what he describes as a vast criminal enterprise involving high-ranking officials at the National Service Scheme, NSS. According to Dr. Ayine, the scheme, which was coordinated, the scheme was coordinated or has coordinated efforts to defraud the state through a sophisticated payroll scam that spanned the entire country. His evidence indicates that senior NSS administrators, including district directors, payroll officers, and even the then CEO, conspired over several years to inflate the payroll with fake names. Speaking at a press briefing earlier, Dr. Ayine said investigators uncovered a staggering 81,885 ghost names used to illegally siphon public funds. According to him, initial estimates suggest the operation diverted approximately 548 million Ghana cedis from the National Treasury. The funds, he said, were originally allocated to support newly enrolled service personnel, were instead channeled into the pockets of corrupt officials and other collaborators. You should take a listen to what he's been saying.
Our investigations have revealed a sprawling criminal enterprise whose network covers the entire country. This criminal enterprise was run by top-level executives of the National Service Authority and their accomplices in the private sector, known as vendors or service providers. This criminal enterprise resulted in the siphoning of huge sums of public funds into private pockets. In total, we can confirm from our evidence on the docket and from interrogations that a whopping 548,333,542 cedis and 65 pesos, 18,962 cedis and 24 pesos was lost. In the 2020-2021 service year, 55,670,584 cedis and 32 pesos was siphoned. In the 2022-2023 service year, this is the one that is more surprising and very shocking, 350,926,977 cedis and 7 pesos were lost. No, 12 pesos was lost to the state. And then for the 2023-2024 service year, 32,881,157 and 7 pesos was lost to the Republic. In total, as I stated, we lost over 548 million Ghana cedis to the criminal enterprise perpetrated by these executives, these directors and staff, as well as the service providers in the marketplace. The criminal enterprise that resulted in the loss of this colossal sum of money to the state by some directors and staff, which they subsequently exploited to misappropriate state funds for their personal gain. This they did in direct collaboration with vendors and other accomplices. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, our investigations have revealed that prior to the commencement of each new service year, the directors would submit to Parliament for approval a budget figure representing the number of prospective service personnel for that particular service year. Consequently, or consistently, these figures were inflated by huge numbers. During the fiscal year, the directors will write to the Minister of Finance requesting permission to utilize excess funds allocated in the budget of the National Service Authority. Once authorized, the directors will transfer the funds into NSA's project account at the Agricultural Development Bank, and under the pretext of executing projects, will divert the funds into private pockets. Another criminal scheme hatched and exploited by the directors and staff is the deployment of ghost names onto the NSA system. Once deployed, the directors will then request that both ghost names and genuine names be transmitted by the head of accounts to the Ghana Interbank payment and settlement systems, that is GIPS for payment. These payments included payments to each cardholders procured for the fictitious national service personnel. Our investigations compared monthly data of verified national service personnel generated from the central management system and submitted to the NSA accounts office, and the data of the NSA personnel who were actually paid through the GIPS system for a period of 6 years. That is from 2018 to 2024. It was established that a total of 587,543 personnel were to be submitted to GIPS for payment of allowances. Meanwhile, data from GIPS showed that a total of 650,165 personnel were paid, indicating that 63,672 constituted ghost names. These consisted of the following categories of personnel. That is, national service personnel who were blocked on the CMS system during the registration process. Then personnel, national service personnel numbers that exist in the payment records but do not exist on the central management system. And then, of course, NSA or national service volunteers, and then some management staff and marketplace vendors. Fellow countrymen and women, our investigators additionally established that some of the ghost names were added to the list submitted by vendors, representing the number of service personnel to whom they had supplied items or provided loan facilities, allegedly. When these vendors eventually received the payments, the directors and staff would then contact the vendors whose accounts had received payments, meet with them, and collect the additional money that had been added to the vendors' payments. For instance, we have conclusively established that after collecting these funds, some of the suspects, such as Gezi, Nyako, and Othing, handed them over to suspect Osei Asibe Entry in cash, and on some occasions deposited the cash into his bank account. Osei Asibe was the chief executive, the director general of the National Service Authority. Some directors, such as Gifty Owari Mensah, created and executed a meticulously detailed plan using NSP, National Service Personnel Allowances, as security to obtain a loan of 30,698,218 cedis, 69 pesos, from the Agricultural Development Bank, ADB, at an interest rate of 23%. She achieved these results by using other people's information to register a company called Blocks of Life Consult without their knowledge or permission. Subsequently, she presented Blocks of Life Consult through and in the person of Akwesi Ofori-Mintah to an official of the Agricultural Development Bank, and enlisting her husband, Mr. Peter Mensah, a lawyer, to act as one of the directors or representative of the said company. She told ADB that the company specialized in supplying home appliances to national service personnel and proposed that ADB finance the company to enable it to supply these items on hire purchase basis to the service personnel, with the NSA being responsible for handling deductions and repayments. During the period, Gifty was the acting director, Gifty Owari Mensah was the acting director of the authority. However, on the marketplace of the authority, there was no indication that Blocks of Life was a registered vendor. Within 2 service years, suspect Gifty Owari Mensah used a total of 9,934 ghost names to misappropriate the aforementioned funds. Investigation further established that after ADB transferred the funds into the account of the company, she subsequently transferred the funds into 4 different company accounts, with the names of Amiacom, Scaffold, Oche, and Aristo Logistics and Trading. It was further established that suspect Gifty is a director of Amiacom, and Scaffold Company Limited belongs to suspect Abraham Gezi. that between 3rd March 2023 and 24th May 2024, suspect Gifty transferred 22,925,518 Ghana cedis and 69 pesos to Amiacom, 1 million Ghana cedis to Scaffold, 1,572,000 Ghana cedis to Oche, and 5,200,000 Ghana cedis to Aristo Logistics and Training. We have this on record. We have all the bank details. We have everything, in the docket. Investigations, however, established that Eric Nyako, from 2017 until April 2024, and Idrisu Ibn Abubakar, April 2024 to December 2024, were responsible for preparing and transmitting NSP payroll data to GIPS for payment of allowances with the approval of the former NSA Director General, Mustafa Yusuf, who is now an MP, Gifty Oware Abuaji, acting from February 2021 to September 2021, and Osel Sibe Enchwe, September 2021 to January 2025. Without their explicit authority, nothing was possible. In other words, all these transfers could not have taken place without the authorization of the chief executive officers and or the director general, depending on the nomenclature that was used to describe their roles. In the 2022-2023 service year, a total of 8,256,000 Ghana cedis was deposited into an eSwitch account numbered 1177042059, which is registered in the name of suspect Ose Asibe. Investigations showed that he personally received these funds. During a search at his residence, the aforementioned eSwitch card was found, and we intend to tender it in evidence during the course of the trial. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, our investigations further revealed that another suspect, Haruna Maulaya of Al-Faida Ventures, a vendor in the marketplace, received a total of 21,306,272 Ghana cedis and 43 pesos into his account from 2017 to 2024. Suspect Rose Hamilton of Marine Ventures received a total of 50,750,923 Ghana cedis, 15 pesos into her account from 2017 to 2024. Suspect Isaac Asamani of Option Buy Ventures received a total of 11,458,686 Ghana cedis, 90 pesos into his account from 2027 to 2024. A total payment of 167,554,398 cedis and 50 pesos was made into the account of a savings and loan company, a savings and loan entity between 2019 and 2024. Suspect Sylvia Opari of Silsona, the names of the companies are very interesting. Silsona Ventures received a total payment of 10,746,634 Ghana cedis and 41 pesos into her account from 2021 to 2024. Suspect Jacob Yorsin of Inyasampo Ventures received a total payment of 19,199,638 Ghana cedis and 57 pesos into his account from 2021 to 2024. Suspects Philomena Atta and Stephen Kobina Jemfi of Brainwave Ventures received a total of 17,646,523 Ghana cedis and 80 pesos into their accounts from 2021 to 2024. Suspect Solomon Jomina of Alpha Rita Ventures received a total payment of 8,236,019 cedis and 67 pesos into his account from 2021 to 2024. Having concluded our investigations, we'll be filing charges against 12 suspects who worked as directors and staff of the NSA.
Well, he mentioned the names of the former officials in his address, but let's take the conversation back. You recall that the research team here at Joy News did their own investigation, and Isaac Kofi Ajay just joined me in studio. Kofi, let's start from when you did the projection, which tells me that you're not surprised at the figure that the Attorney General
Not at all. But the big question was how we're able to get that number of ghost names onto the National Service payroll, and the AG has actually explained some of the steps, but this still remain, as he keeps mentioning, suspect. But what we did in February when we first saw this issue was to use the numbers that were being, dished out in the public to actually do some of the investigation, try and see how much the state may have lost if indeed these ghost names were actually on the payroll of NSS. And we did the math, and we said that it could be in excess of 500 million, Ghana cedis, and this is around the same figure that the AG is quoting, close to approximately 548 million, 548.33 million Ghana cedis that the AG is quoting at the moment. And so we actually projected that if we were using the numbers from 2018 to 2024, the state, if indeed this was true, this is actually true, could lose some, in excess of 500 million Ghana cedis.
Well, he mentions, top officials, 12. Let's talk about these NSA directors and the stuff.
Yes, it's not just individuals involved, but top government officials, former government officials who were actually involved according to the AG, and then also AIDS vendors, and he mentions a lawyer definitely linked to Afenyo-Markin. And in fact, if you look at the money lost at the moment, according to the AG, he said that it went through different channels. It wasn't just the payment systems that these monies came through. He made mention of NSS own bank account at ADB, where they will go to the finance ministry and tell them that, look, they want to do some projects, and so they should allow them to use the extra money in their account. And these were some of the processes through which they actually lost some of the 548 million that we are talking about. There were four, channels that the AG spoke about that I want us to possibly analyze. The first one was using the NSP. So the NSPs who were actually blocked on the CMS, during the registration process. These names were also added. And then, according to the AG, where actually funds were given to these individuals. And the NSP's numbers that exist in the payments records, but do not exist on the CMS. That's the system of the NSS. And then also we have the NSA volunteers who were actually also in this mix. And then the NSA management, the staff and marketplace vendors. This is where he stretched on to give details where names were actually mentioned, individuals were mentioned, that they were vendors, and then the quantum of money that each of them actually received was what he was actually mentioning just a while ago. And a number of individuals, he says that charges are being pressed against them. The former sports minister is part of them. Afenyo-Markin is also the former deputy executive director of the service, and then also her husband, who is a lawyer, according to the AG, is also in the brackets, and then also the former boss of the NSA, also in the mix. So let's say four big shots, according to the AG, are currently being investigated, plus the number of vendors that he made mention when he actually gave these details.
Interesting. Out of these four, the executive director at the time and the deputy, I'm not surprised. The former sports minister, however, and Gifty's spouse is what would rather, surprise me.
I mean, the former sports minister also was actually in that space.
Yeah, for a while. Yeah.
And then her husband, according to, the narrative of the AG, I mean, in terms of creating companies, is the blocks of life, to get a loan from ADB by using NSS funds as collateral, all of that. He was, according to the AG, was one of the directors or executive of the company, and that's why he's also a person of interest. But it's interesting to note that in these figures that the AG mentioned, and the total amount that they believe the state may have lost as a result of this, the biggest came in 2022, 2023. And this is what actually caught our attention when we're trying to look at the numbers. In excess of 350, let's say closely 351 million Ghana cedis lost within that period, where in that same period, according to what the AG said, was when the NSS introduced the metric app, where they said it was supposed to weed out some, ghost names, and according to them, save the state some 140 million Ghana cedis. It was around that same time that we recorded the highest losses, or the highest number of ghost names, according to the AG, were actually recorded in that period. And then if you do the math, that's more than 50% of the total amount of money the AG claimed that the country may have lost. And so if indeed that app was introduced to actually weed out ghost names, how come in that period the AG is recording that we recorded the highest number of losses in...
I mean, Kofi, just like a vehicle. A vehicle is manufactured to really make our lives very easy and comfortable. It's supposed to transport you. But if you do not drive it well and the way you're supposed to, you may just have an accident. And so that app, I'm certain that intended use and intended purposes maybe didn't arrive at that. But let's bring in Desmond Ezrel, partner at Cyber Law and Technology Practice, and a tech law and e-commerce law lecturer at Gimpa Law School, to help us understand how such a breach could really happen without stakeholders on that value chain being aware, the likes of the Ministry of Education and other stakeholders. Thank you for your attention this afternoon. And so for you who has worked around data so much and technology so much, how do you think the Attorney General is arriving at all of this without the breach of data?
Well, Attorney General, first of all, is spearheading law enforcement. So they will have authorization for that. So if the question is about the potential data breach in the workflow of the Attorney General, I do not see how that will become an issue. But if these systems are designed such that they are in modules, and that is where you might want to maybe extend the conversation. Okay. So for instance, we can have a module for national service personnel where the national service personnel will do what we call onboarding and registration. You can have a module for institutions, because institutions also do requests for service personnel so that they can be posted for them. So that would also be a module in the system that allows institutions to make the request. You would have a module for administrators, and administrators would be like high-level account holders, what we call maker checkers, so that they can give approval for probably onboarding approval, or request for appointment or request for posting. They will give those approvals. So the challenge that we have with such a design is that where there is collusion, and I'm proceeding on the basis of the facts as shared by the Attorney General, we've not seen any counter presentation to that yet. But if we proceed on those facts, then the challenge here is that because there is an inside collusion, and cybersecurity would say that this is the enemy within, there's a complete collusion in the system. So all the modules and the security procedures that have been put in place, they pretty much have, the checks and balances in there. So if I want 500 NSS names into the system who are not really NSS persons, I only need to initiate an NSS registration and onboarding, and I'm the approver, or I'm in collusion with the approver in the value chain. So when those names come in, all that has to be done is that the approver will just approve them, and that's where the maker checker concept is. We call it segregation of duties. Someone has to make, someone has to check. That is the way you ensure system integrity. Of course, you keep audit logs. I'll talk about that. But where there's a collusion between the maker checker, because you don't have like a key man risk cycle where you know that, okay, every year we need to change these people because there's a potential of collusion. And we look at all these things when we are discussing cyber risk. The potential that when somebody stays on a system for a long time, they themselves become a risk to how the system runs. And I pretty much can glean from the Attorney General's presentation some of these things from the technical perspective, you know. Now, on the institution side, if we want 1,000, 2,000 requests, we just need to set up fictitious companies or collude with companies that are in the game plan with us and then get them to make the request. The approver is part of the compromise system. So the approver would definitely approve for these things to go through. So on the two legs, you would see that it's very easy. I mean, it's very easy for you to generate all these requests of how many NSS persons you want, because there are different ways by which you can make these requests from the NSS personnel module, where you can get individuals to make these requests. You can even get one person or two person or three persons to be making multiple requests, so long as they have the identification details. And you can harvest this information. I mean, we want everybody to have a Ghana card.
Right.
If they are able to go out there and convince people one way or the other to give out their Ghana cards, they can come back with myriad number of Ghana cards. I can imagine going to the rural area, for instance, and trying to lure people to, you know, let go their Ghana card details and then create some institutions that matches those details, come back to the system and create this information, knowing very well that the approver is part of the compromise chain. So they see this information coming on and they give the necessary approval rather than raising the necessary tickets to have them properly checked.
I mean,
so that's an easy way to get it done.
Okay. So my next question really would have been that, can all of this happen so that all the stakeholders on the value chain will not even know at all? But you've just been enlightening us on how, because of how much power the other person at the end, or the person who is orchestrating it has, and the access that he has, they indeed have, can really manipulate all of this without the other stakeholders knowing at all. But I mean, this may be far-fetched, but is it not something that is anticipated so that the other stakeholders can at least get to know that something of the sort is happening? For example, what the Attorney General alludes to, that, well, some of these ghost names were used as collateral to take a loan or to take money from ADB. And I really am wondering, for a bank, they do not have any mechanism to check that for names as large as that amount, it could be unreal.
Okay, so we've moved from these ghost names to trying to deal with how the banks are going to evaluate the information. I think the evaluation, is that the case? I want to.
It's a perfect way to go.
Okay, I think the banks usually will go with what we call first glance information. Of course, they are supposed to do due diligence, and I'm not going to hold brief for any bank. I mean, once you receive a request and the request is based on some information, at first glance, if I provided that information, you're likely going to give me the request that I need for, whether the company is fictitious or not. But if there is a way by which every request that comes from the NSS to its paying banks, for instance, is supposed to be evaluated or validated against the NSS system, then we would need to have system level communication, what the technologies will call an API, for instance, that allows the banks to then validate to find out that for every payment that they are making, the person actually belongs to the system. Okay. But granted, you would also notice that I've told you that once there is an internal collusion, the system can still validate an existing name, which is actually a ghost name, because ghost name here doesn't mean that it's not on the NSS system. Ghost name actually means that it's on the NSS system, but it is not an entity that the NSS is dealing with. So, for instance, Desmond is supposed to be a national service personnel, and he's not on the system, but he's not actually a national service personnel. So there's always that gap between who the government is actually paying and who is actually on the ground doing the work. So yes, the banks, on first glance, if they receive the information, they would give the request. But I think that maybe an extended due diligence with the Bank of Ghana sometimes hammers on, especially when it comes to KYC, where the amount involved is quite huge. Even from the Payment Services and Systems, Payment Systems and Services Act, we are required to do some level of KYC depending on the risk of transaction involved. So, like I said, I will not hold any brief for any bank. But from a technology perspective and from a process flow perspective, it's easier for someone to go to the bank, provide an information, and all the bank needs to do is check at first glance with the records before them if that information actually suffices for the transaction. And if that is the case, it will. So where you have a system that has been compromised, which contains records that someone can look at and verify and say, oh yeah, the person belongs, it's easy to get away with these things. But what would expose it is what we have done by going extra to now try to check the information in the NSS system as against what government should actually be engaging, as in what government should actually be paying for, who is actually, part of government system to receive those benefits. And that's where the exposure comes in. I think we might also need to give credit because it's possible that system, and I haven't reviewed the system, so I'm speaking from a general perspective of how some of these things should work.
Okay.
It's also possible that the NSS system provides immutable logs. It's possible.
Immutable what?
Log, as in audit trails.
Okay.
Okay. So it could keep records of all these malfeasance happening, and you cannot remove them. That's what we mean when you say immutable logs. So these information gets stuck in the system and is good for forensics, and so it's possible that government through the AG has done this sort of assessment and come to a conclusion that these things electronically actually happened. So you have issues to do with modification of records. There's the possibility of unauthorized disclosure of access codes, the possibility of unauthorized intervention, a lot of things going on in there from all the things that the AG is saying. And all these things are all potential crimes as well, because we have an Electronic Transactions Act, which is very copious on some of these things. But of course, it's a matter of proof. And it's also about strategy. The AG may decide that it's not even going to look at them from an electronic crime perspective and focus on conventional crime and secure his conviction.
Okay.
He could also say that it's okay to go with electronic evidence and also go with some of the charges that forms electronic charges.
That's one. Stay with me. I will go and speak to Edem Senanu. He is an anti-graft campaigner. And when I come back to you, Ezra, the question you'll be answering for me will be that, well, in case government or any interested party doesn't decide to want to look beyond, are there ways that we can come up to at least even stop it before we start getting suspicious and wanting to elect ourselves to want to go and look further? Stay with me on that, but I want to go and engage Edem Senanu, who is an anti-graft campaigner. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. After the briefing from the Attorney General, what would be your reaction to this? Would you say that as a government, they're making progress in the fight against corruption?
Well, clearly they are making some effort at having traction on these issues. It's early days yet, so the more important thing is whether this is sustained over the entire tenure of this current government. But it's certainly a good start. And it's that sends a signal of confidence for those of us in the anti-corruption sector.
I mean, you have always been very vocal about anti-corruption, and I want to really find out from you the way and manner in which the investigative bodies such as maybe the OSP, the Attorney General departments are always briefing the media on updates. They call it the update on their investigations. Do you have any challenge with it, or?
Absolutely not. In fact, it is, for me, best practice. I've been one of those who have been canvassing that we actually expect that all anti-graft agencies would, on a continuous basis, update and engage the public on what is going on. That process by itself is what serves as a deterrent, because, you see, the lack of information, the vacuum on any precedents being set, persons being sanctioned, people jailed, etc., is part of the reason why the impunity of graft has continued and actually accelerated over time. And so in crafting Act 959 for the OSP, for example, we learned from the lessons of all the other anti-graft agencies, the YOCOs, the BNI, CID, FICs, and told ourselves, look, that gap between information on what they are doing and what is in the public space so that citizens are aware that this is dangerous terrain, and therefore they would refrain or be reticent to engage in such graft activities of malfeasance, would not happen because they know there's an active engagement by security and anti-corruption agencies in the space. So in Act 959, for example, when we put there that the OSP should report back to the citizens every 6 months at most, our expectation wasn't that he had to wait the 6 months to report. Our expectation indeed is that much more regularly, much more frequently, the OSP report, and that actually should be a best practice for all agencies. So I am absolutely delighted that the AG, without even having his mandate changed, understands that this is the way you carry along the public, this is the way you serve notice that any person so minded thinking that they can get away with this kind of malfeasance and greed are not likely to do so.
I'm also curious, what do you say to persons who say that it is almost, or the opters are looking like public prosecution more than they updating the public?
I'll say then they are not really exposed. This is standard practice across the globe. Go to the US. The FBI, anytime it takes up a case, a day before or on the day of when they are lodging the case, there will be an open engagement with media. Indicating the details of the case, the action they are being taken. That's at the start of the case. And the thinking is simply this. In any case, once you get into court is typically open unless it's a closed session. So these are details that are going to be discussed whether you like it or not. It's standard practice in most jurisdictions that, especially in developed democracies, that the public is given indication of what exactly is going on and what the state prosecutors and investigators are doing about it. So this is nothing new. We can just check what happens in the U.S. You find that regularly, open air, it will be reported, CNN and other such news outlets. So this is nothing new.
I mean, beyond the Attorney General, addressing us today, have you had any challenge or the sort with any of the updates, particularly from the OSP, where persons have said that why bring the health of a suspect when you're briefing the media? And this will be the reason why I'm asking about people concerned about public prosecution. You have just taken us to the US or across the world to know that this is standard practice. But maybe the simple question is, how much is too much?
Well, I think that it depends on the specific case in question. I have felt that if you take the case of our former finance minister, Mr. Ken Okrata, I have felt that the legal team, including himself, did not handle this as well as they ought to. I think right at the beginning, they should have facilitated a direct engagement with the medical facility and its professionals and ensure that documentation from that facility was made available. If that was done, it would have been under the cover. There are many people who are driving to various interrogation spaces and following up on cases, which is not in the public space, not in the public purview, simply because that which the anti-corruption agencies are asking for has been provided. And I think that in this instance, it was a breakdown in communication when it got to the point where Mr. Fred and his people accused the OSP of raiding his house when that wasn't the case. That didn't help the situation well. I think that when security agencies of that nature invite you, you give it as much importance, supply all the information, make them believe that you are really interested, and you don't have the kind of situations we are seeing.
What do you make of the persons involved in the allegations so far, especially at the NSS? What do you make of the caliber of persons involved?
The gross impunity just shocks me. I mean, at the level at which they are, the assumption that they could get away with it is striking. And it probably speaks to a lack of our breakdown in our system. I was listening to the earlier conversation, and it's the reason why you have external audits. When internal systems break down, you need an external system to come and cross-check. And that's why you have external auditors. That's why you have, when there are projects, we have evaluators who come in after midterm or end of term and come and cross-check everything. And I think we should probably invest more in our external system, knowing full well that many people think they can get away with this kind of things. We need to go beyond the internal systems that appear to be broken down, flawed, weak, and ensure that we have independent external auditors, interventions that can randomly select, let's say, 5% of the database and say we're going to call the people, see who is within the vicinity to go and cross-check, are these people real, are they working, etc. It should not be impossible. It's the reason why even at the national level we have checks and balances. Parliament is supposed to have oversight over the executive. Invite representatives of the executive when we have questions. If it's roads and highways, the roads and highways minister must come and answer questions. These external independent systems need to be strengthened. In this instance, we should find out what external audits were done on the NSS database. Why did it fail to highlight or red flag this issue much earlier than we are seeing now?
So the NSS, as we know it now, I mean, you have just been suggesting some of the things that we should do moving forward. But the NSS, as we know it now, and also from learning from Desmond earlier in our conversation, it looks as though the system in itself can put whoever, even if it was nearly Jesus Christ, in the position to have so much power to be able to alter the systems to their gains. The system as we know it now, can we do anything about it, the NSS scheme in itself?
Well, yes, I'm sure the other panelists can speak to that. But, you know, it's usual to have people having threshold access. So you are in a system, but you can only do A or B. And for C to be done, it has to be escalated to a higher level. Those are levels of authority, and they are coded into the system. I think that on hindsight, reviewing the current system, we need to make sure we build in those authority levels, checks and balances, and make sure we have external independent audit systems which can come in from time to time, maybe every year or two, a flash random, not anticipated. And we should not just do it for NSS. The question I keep asking is that how do you not know that this is not happening in other systems as well? Nurses, wherever else we are having large numbers being engaged. So I think that, yes, we can rebuild the system, but you need to make sure that those systems themselves, those who are building it, are not compromised right from the start.
I mean, you have talked about external auditors and all. Again, the other stakeholders, for example, the Ghana Ministry of Education, would you say that they didn't play a certain role well at all? Or again, because of the way that system is, it allowed the NSS to be able to carry out this?
I think that until we do an examination, so there has to be a review of what were the checks and balances, what are our current checks and balances that were supposed to work and that failed.
Right.
If it included, for example, circuit supervisors having to go around and check, are they these national service people, is the names of the and file a report that goes through the education system and will allow for cross-checking and validation. Then somebody needs to be fired. Was our circuit supervision system working? Were the supervisors going around? Did they check whether these NSS people were on duty, actually working or absent? So until we do a review, some kind of forensic audit on what actually transpired. So it's not just about the fact that the persons involved have been identified, monies are going to be retrieved, perhaps punitive measures and sanctions applied to them. It is also for us to investigate why did we get to this point? What were the systemic failures and weaknesses that brought us here? That is a critical part so that we can learn and build on this, leverage it as we move ahead.
And so for me, maybe finally, Adam, so what would you require? What would you ask? Is it to recover or to recover and also prosecute them? Which one will be your priority?
I always say that the first thing is to recover. But in our sector, we don't do A without B. These A or B questions don't always serve the right purpose. You need both A and B. You need A because we need those resources to continue to build this nation. And you need B to send a message to those who may be so inspired that, people can get away with this. They think they can continue. No, the sanctions, so we say carrot and stick. There must be, for those who help identify, some rewards. For those who have done the wrong thing, there must be some sanctions. So you cannot just retrieve, even if it is the naming and shaming is part of the sanctions. I would say that, look, we need to put in place as quickly as possible a community service program that allows people, you can go and help us build roads, do some agric gardening, where everybody can see that this is what happens to you. Let's still use manpower in a very pragmatic way if possible.
Thank you. Thank you for talking to us. But Desmond, let me come back to you. So we're on how we can at least identify these things before we get to this point. For an institution like the NSS, and of course we have other institutions like that, will it be that it will take an Attorney General such as Dr. Dominic Ayine, or it will be that somebody is very interested and then they decide to want to go and look and then they discover? Or there are ways in which when we come up with these systems, we can already integrate, and then electronically I'm talking about, integrate systems in place where we don't even get to this point, this one.
Absolutely, we can do that. I think, first of all, we should be interested in the entire workflow, okay? You don't design systems in exclusion of what the actual work is, because if you do that, you will only be transposing the real risk. The administrative inefficiency will be moved into technology, and you are not going to have like a very robust process of assessing these things. So we have to be interested in the entire workflow, and I'm sure maybe based on this, very good job will be done moving forward, where we look at from the onboarding process all the way to when a national service person finishes their national service and they are decommissioned from the system for whatever reason. We have to be interested in it. Why am I saying so? Every step of the workflow, if you do a very good assessment, you can come up with the red flags. You can, for instance, determine that this maker checker at this part of the workflow is not good enough, because we can have two people just collude and get away with it. So what do? You might want to come in with a system level approval, where that approval just requires certain key parameters. So for instance, there could be parameters that are not easy to modify: a government issued number, a government issued code, an identity captured, anything that it's easy for us to assess. Then we can allow the system to leverage on that to then provide the approval. What I'm proposing means that you're going to cut down on the number of human approvals that you need, or the human interventions that you need, and you probably relegate them to the most very critical things. You could also increase the number of approvals that is needed for a certain process. If you notice from the workflow that that process itself is a high risk, so if it's just one maker, one checker, or one approver, people can bypass it. You can increase the approvers. So you have to ensure that you are bringing administrative efficiency into technology, and then you would have to find ways to make sure that technology delivers that for you, because we have a saying that everything is programmatically possible. It's just what you tell the system to do.
This one, currently the NSS system as we have it, do you think we should do away with it entirely? Overhaul it completely?
Not do away with it entirely. I think I went too quick. We should revamp it. We need a 2.0 or a 3.0 of that system, where workflow is very clear. For instance, if government through its regulators, whether it's the GES or the technology regulator like NITA, is demanding for the architecture of some of these, and permit me to say this, maybe my ruffle some feathers, but let me say it. I think we need to get to a point where key regulators who are in charge of government systems should be able to get access to information even when these systems are built by private persons. We don't need to stay in a corner where private people build this system, which is good because we have to leverage on the expertise and also open up the market. But we don't need to get to a point where if, for instance, say the DPC or NITA or maybe the CSA want to see how this system is developed so that they can ensure regulatory compliance, they're going to have a whole lot of back and forth, and chances are they are not even going to get to see some of these things. These are the reasons why we don't even have synergy with some of the solutions that we deploy. They are so siloed in such a way that when issues happen, everyone is running around trying to do firefighting. But systems are developed, and based on those systems, some of these things can easily be picked up even before they get to the point where Attorney General under his oral admonition will go ahead and do an investigation and then come up with information that will awe us all. But I think that we get to that point.
I mean, finally, before I let you go, I think I'm enjoying this conversation because of the data angle of it. But do you think that if the Attorney General wants to stretch a bit and go beyond 2018, say go 2017, 16, 15, even further, per your experience with data, do you think that would find something quite interesting?
The answer is simple. Yes, if the records are there. So, for instance, if the database still holds all records from 2018, 2012, as at the time that this particular system was deployed, because, of course, the system can also not hold something that it has not processed. That's also a fact when it comes to technology. So, if this system was deployed, say, 2016, and its data retention is good enough, and we've been consistent with it, we can go back and get 2016. Of course, I agree with forensic people who will say that, well, data can be volatile. So if it's deleted and it's so long a time, other data may have overridden it, and then it's not easy for us to find out what has happened beyond a certain period of time. That's a matter that can be addressed when we get there. But the simple answer to your question is, it is possible for you to go back to history if the data is properly retained. And that's why retention is an important, in fact, all our technology laws speaks about retention. All our technology laws speaks about retention. The Electronic Transactions Act, the Data Protection Act, they all speak about retention. So it's something that even the lawmaker anticipated way before today.
Right. Desmond, thank you so much for joining us today on The Pulse with such insightful conversation on electronic transaction and many other things that may have been used to orchestrate this syndicate. Now, away from the NSS scandal, let's do some illegal mining. Now, there is growing tension in Samreboi in the western region, where a group of irate youth have blocked roads in front of the Somatec Timber Company to protest the arrest of illegal miners operating in a nearby forest reserve. According to Joy News' source, the individuals arrested were caught mining illegally by the Forestry Commission's Rapid Response Team, despite an ongoing crackdown on galamsey operations led by the Inspector General of the police in the area. The arrested miners are believed to have links to a local chief under whose orders they allegedly entered the reserve to mine. In retaliation, the youth took to the street early this morning, obstructing traffic, harassing commuters, and reportedly assaulting some personnel of the timber company. The protest comes just days after the IGP's task force temporarily withdrew from the area. Police say they have called for reinforcements to restore order and ensure the safety of residents and workers. Let's get on Zoom and have more on this from Erastus Asare Donko, who definitely has been following this. Erastus, thank you for joining us today. Well, do you know why the police withdrew from the operation, or it was just routine?
It's just routine. The IGP's task force in the area is a rotational one. And so as and when they spend a number of months there, they are changed. The leadership is changed. The entire staff is changed. A new and fresh reinforcement is brought in. And so they have done that change. Consistently since they started, they've changed like 3 times. So this is just routine. But I must say that even in the midst of the crackdown, we still have quite a number of recalcitrant people who are still willing to enter the various reserves in the area. Remember, we have Tano Nimre, which is within the Samreboi enclave, and then we have Tano Anya, which is towards Enche in the Awuin municipality. We have Boyne River, we have the other forest reserves, some of them globally biosignificant diversity areas. And these are forest reserves that the company, Somatex, has developed, reforested, and depended on for many years. And so they keep cutting from their concession, and they replace, they plant trees in replacement. But for some time now, they have become a subject of encroachment by illegal miners. And that is why the IGP has done some very valuable work in that area. So far, a number of excavators running into about 100 have been seized, found working within the forest reserves. And when they did that momentary change, now they spotted some of the youth going back into the reserve to mine, and the rapid response team of the Forestry Commission stepped in to go and arrest them. I understand that after the arrest, the youth became agitated, blocked the roads because they claim a vehicle belonging to the company was involved in the arrest. And so they have come to register their protest and to prevent the company from working.
Well,
so far,
okay. Proceed.
So far, we have had the IGP has ordered a reinforcement of police in the area. They've brought in members of the FPU, and then the skeleton staff that was left to man the over 100 excavators within the Samreboi enclave have also been deployed to the area. So now calm has been restored, and quite a number of police men are stationed there to protect the assets of the company.
Well, Erastus, I mean, knowing you and hearing about a local chief, I'm certain you'd pursue that matter. Have you reached out to him?
Well, I'm still trying to get access to him. That is why I have reserved his name for now. I want to hear from him what he makes of the allegations going around that he instructed his boys. Those they claim are his boys who were found in the forest. And so he instructed them to go back there, even when the police have been mounting a strong campaign in the area to go back to the forest to mine. And so when I get him, I'll be able to put his thoughts across.
All right, Erastus, thank you so much for updates from Samreboi. You're watching The Pulse. Please stay. There's more after this break.